Hello, yeah, welcome to another tutorial with Tia, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make this stylish bubu that has an asymmetric neckline and a cold shoulder sleeve detail. Now this sleeve is a cut together, remember it's a bubu dress. So to get started, I'm going to be making use of the following materials, and I'm going to be leaving the quantity in the description box because we are going to be combining two materials together. You need a piece of the material for turning the neckline and the sleeve, then your main fabric. So the first thing you're going to do is to fold your fabric into two. Now I'm going to be cutting the front and the back together, and what will determine what you are going to use to fold is the body size of the client, your client body size. In my case, I'm sewing for a plus size person, so I'm going to be making use of 18 inches. Okay, this is inclusive of all the allowance I'm adding. So to the original measurement of the person, that is after dividing the biggest measurement in the hip, the waist or bust, you can decide to add 5 inches or 4 inches or 6 inches, which is totally dependent on how wide your client wants it to be. But in my case, I'm making use of 18 inches in total, inclusive of my sewing allowance. So the first thing I did was just to create my origin line, as you can see. And after doing that, I went ahead to mark my client's sleeve opening. Now the client sleeve opening I'm using here is 10.5 inches. After that, the waist shoulder to waist is 16 inches. Then the shoulder to hip is 24.5 inches. And on this line, I'm just going to create horizontal. I'm going to be marking horizontal lines. And of course, make sure that your cloth is folded based on the length you want for your bubu dress. So I just went ahead to confirm if I'm having the same 18 inches on this line to ensure that everything is straight, and that is why you can see I'm holding this down with some weight in order for it not to move. So I'm going to be going back to the origin line, and on this origin line I'm going to be placing my shoulder measurement divided by 2. On this particular line, for this client, the shoulder measurement is 15 divided by 2, making use of 7.5 inches, after which I'll be adding the sleeve length. Also, for the neck width and the neck depth, I'm going to be making use of 4 inches for the neck wideness and for the neck deepness, like the depth. Although in the later video, you are going to see that I increased the neck width by 1 more inch. Now, after marking the neck width, I just went ahead to indicate the shoulder measurement, okay? The shoulder measurement. After that, I added my sleeve length. And this is totally optional. You could make yours lower or higher depending on what your client wants or what you want. And I added 1 extra inch for sleeve hemming. After doing that, I went down by 1 inch and I created my shoulder slope down to the neck width, as you can see. And I added a 0.5 inch, which I'm going to be using for joining the shoulders together. Now for this neckline, I'm not going to be cutting it out for the front and the back now because we have to work on it later. So I went to the bust region, and on this bust region, I'm going to be marking 12 inches. Okay, this is inclusive of the ease I added to the bust measurement. Okay, so I marked 12.5, and that is going to be for the bust. While for the waist and the hip, I'm going to be making use of 15 inches. Okay, I'm going to be making use of 15 inches for the waist and for the hip and for the hemline, because this particular client wants this bubu dress to be really free on her. So let's say you have your hip measurement for your client or for yourself to be 42 inches, divided by 4, that's 10.5. So you can add maybe 5 extra inches to it, that'll be 15.5. So after doing that, I just went ahead to add 1 extra inch, which I'm going to be using for my sewing allowance. And I'm just going to connect these 2 points together using a straight line. After connecting the hip to the hemline, I went ahead to connect the hip to the waist using a straight line also. And I would also connect the waist to the sleeve opening line. Now I'm going to be using a curve to connect this point, because remember that on the sleeve opening, we're not having the same measurements as the hip and the waist. So I'm just going to add 1 extra inch for my sewing allowance. Then I use a slight curve using my pattern master to connect these 2 points together, as you can see. Now, after doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to measure what I have. That's my 10 inches for my sleeve opening. And I'm just going to rule that points together. Then I'm going to go ahead to make curve. Remember that that's a sharp corner. And in order for us to be able to sew this properly, we are going to need to create a curve. Yes, just to blend this into the original line. And this is it, fam. For the basic pattern, everything is ready. This is just a boo dress, like I said. So right now, we're just going to go ahead to cut the excess we don't need out, so that I'll be able to separate my back from my front, and we can work on the front pattern. So if you notice, I did not cut through the neckline. I just cut out the excess we have there. So I'm going to be taking that back off, and now I'm going to be working on the front. The first thing you want to do is to elongate that neckline, okay, that neckline, and connect the 2 points together to have a rectangle. So this is what the neckline is giving us. Now remember that the particular tutorial we're working on has an asymmetric neckline, so you want to determine the side you are going to be placing yours. Now in this particular case, I discovered that this neckline is going to be too high, even though it's an asymmetric neckline. So I decided to come down by 1.5 by 1 inch more, and that is why I'm using 5.5 in total for one part of the neck, since it's an asymmetric neckline. And I'm going to be using a straight line to join these points. But then I added 1 more inch to the neck width on both sides in order to make this wider a bit, because I don't want this to be tight or to be choking on the client's neck. So the original design has a curved asymmetric neckline, but because I want to use this to cut out the back neckline, that is why you see I'm using a straight slant. So I'm going to be adjusting it after cutting the back neckline. So this is what the front is giving me, even that is after cutting the neckline. So the next thing we're going to do before we cut the back neckline is to indicate a particular point, and I'm going to be explaining these points properly. From your center front, that means the middle of your center front, as you can see, this is where I have my crease line. So the middle of your center front, that's the middle of your front pattern, you are going to be placing your tape measure, and you are going to be marking your original shoulder measurements. In this particular case, it is 7.5. So from that center front, what I have is 7.5. You want to indicate that point. It is really important, okay? Because that point is going to help you know where to curve your cold shoulder from. Remember that we're still going to cut out some parts out of this sleeve, because we have a cold shoulder design on one hand. So you want to determine how deep you want your cold shoulder to be too. So please indicate that point properly. And after doing that, let's just quickly go ahead to cut out the back pattern so that we can keep working on the front. So I just went ahead to layer the back underneath, and I did right side facing right side. This is very important, so you don't have your neckline facing the front part. So after that is done, I'm just going to go ahead to cut out the facing for the front. But before then, I went in with my pattern master to create a curve design for the front pattern. Remember I told you that the front pattern has a curved asymmetric neckline, not a straight slant like the one I cut at the back. So this is what I did, and this is what I had after curving it. So I'm just going to go ahead to indicate that point where I have the points where I have this the parts marked for my shoulder measurement. And I'm going to go ahead to cut out using this black fabric to cut out the facing. Now for this facing, we are going to be sewing on the right side, not on the wrong side. It means this black material is going to reflect on the right part of the pattern, of the cloth rather. And after doing that, I just went ahead to mark out this facing. I made use of 3 inches, okay, all through. You could decide to increase yours or reduce yours depending on what you want. Then I also went ahead to add 0.5 inches since I'm going to be sewing on the right side. This is going to be used for hemming that part down and top stitching on the front. Another important thing is if you look at the design of this clothes, it has this rectangular piece, rectangular parts, that's where we have the other fabric. So in this case, I used 3 inches. You need 3 inches, but I'm going to be cutting 4 inches on my black material because I'm going to be using 0.5 to fold on both sides, and I'll be top stitching on this material. So you want to determine the length you have on your bubu dress and use it to cut out your black piece. So here's my black piece, and I'm going to be folding as you can see. Then after folding and sewing on the material, that is when I can go ahead to work on the neckline with the facing. I'm going to do this off camera and I will show you what it looks like. I also went ahead to cut facing for the back, but this facing will be sewn inside. Now, it's not necessary you do an asymmetric neckline for the back. You could do something else. So I went off camera to sew this down. I went off camera to join the front. As you can see, the wrong side of the front on the right side of the facing, because I'll be flipping it to the other side. And after sewing this is what I have in front. So this is what the front looks like. I also went ahead to join the 2 sleeves together. I joined the sleeve together, but the body is not yet joined. So the next thing we're going to do now is to indicate where we have our cold shoulder design. For me, I'm going to be making use of 4.5 inches. You could decide to go lower or you could decide to go higher. Then on the lower part of the sleeve, as you can see, I left about 3 inches. Now, if you don't want your cold shoulder to be so wide, you can go higher. Because at the end of the day, I felt I should have gone higher in my own case. So you just create out any curve. You can use your hand or you could use a pattern. Then, but before you cut totally, leave about 0.5 inch towards that shoulder part where you are going to be having your shoulder measurements, where that point end. I'm just going to go ahead to cut. So you see I left about 0.5. I did not cut everything completely because you will need that 0.5 to stitch down under your shoulder part, like to turn that shoulder part so that it can be very neat. So that is what I just went ahead to do. Then after doing that, you are going to be needing your black fabric, which is going to be used to cut the facing for this cold shoulder detail. Now this curve we created, you are going to be needing a facing which is going to be sewn on the right side. So you just go ahead, fold your fabric into 2 and place this particular shape, that is the cold shoulder design, on your black fabric or any fabric you are using. Then go ahead to mark out the shape. After marking out the shape, determine the width you want. You could do 3 inches, you could do more than that, and then curve it out and cut it. In my case, because I have limited material, I had to cut 2 pieces. I have to cut 2 pieces and join together in the middle. But if you have a longer fabric, you don't need to join it in the middle. Just cut it, unfold, and you're going to have a very long piece. So you want to take your time to sew this curve because it can be a little bit tricky. I'm not going to lie to you. You want to ensure you know how to sew around edges and curves properly before sewing this. So I'm going to be doing that off camera, and also went ahead to cut a facing for the sleeve opening about 3 inches, and I will do the same for the other side. So I went off camera to join the body together. Then I also went ahead to finish the round part, the cold shoulder part. So look at, you can see it now. I went ahead to sew this, and this is what is giving me finally. So far, what do you think of this tutorial? Thank you. See you in my next